A nail gun cracked 3 times, and a framed wall swung upright in the middle of my north meadow. For half a second, I just sat there behind the wheel of my pickup, my boot still resting on the brake, gravel ticking under the tires. There was a house going up where my father's hay shed used to stand. Not near it. Not beside it. Right on top of the packed red dirt where he used to sharpen mower blades and stack feed sacks. A concrete pump growled beside the old black walnut tree. Diesel fumes rolled through the cold March air. Men in hard hats moved across my grass like they belonged there, carrying 2x6s over ground my family had paid taxes on for 34 years. And 20 feet from my bumper, half buried in mud, was the brass survey cap my dad used to tap with his boot and say, "That little piece of metal is why fences matter." Only now it was bent sideways. Beside it stood a fresh orange stake with black marker letters, MR 42A. That was my first clue somebody had misunderstood something important. Or pretended to. I killed the engine and stepped out. The smell hit me first. Wet clay, sawdust, fresh concrete, and hot hydraulic fluid. The sounds came next. Compressors thumping. Framing hammers snapping. The paper rattle of house wrap flapping against studs. A green permit placard had been nailed to a sheet of plywood near the driveway they had carved through my grass. I walked toward it, phone already recording. "Sir," a foreman called, jogging over with a clipboard tucked under one arm. "You can't be inside the active work zone." "This isn't a work zone," I said. "This is my land." He slowed down. Not nervous. Irritated. Like I was a delivery driver at the wrong address. He was maybe 35, sunburned neck, clean boots, yellow vest with Barlow Custom Homes stitched over the pocket. Behind him, a crew was raising another wall section, their boots grinding my meadow into ruts. He glanced at his clipboard. "This is Maple Ridge Estates property. Future lot 42A. "No," I said, pointing past him. "That black walnut is my northeast corner. The stone wall runs south from there. You're standing inside my line." His jaw tightened. "Look, I don't know what you were told, but we've got approved plans, county permits, and HOA authorization. HOA authorization doesn't move a property line." That finally got his attention. I moved around him and photographed everything. The permit placard, the orange stake, the bent brass cap, tire tracks cutting through the wet grass, the concrete truck parked where my dad used to back his old Ford, a jagged gap in the stone wall wide enough for heavy equipment. The foreman followed me, his voice dropping. "You need to leave before I call security. Call whoever signed this." I zoomed in on the permit. Maple Ridge Phase 4 model home. Applicant, Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Authorized representative, Victoria Langford. Vicky Langford. I knew the name. Everyone along Cedar Hollow Road did. White Lincoln Navigator. Perfect blonde bob. HOA president. Real estate broker. The kind of woman who smiled like she was giving you a gift while sliding a knife between your ribs. But Maple Ridge ended at the paved road. My family's 5.8 acres sat outside their covenants, outside their dues, outside their little world of matching mailboxes and approved mulch colors. A chain-link panel rattled behind me. 2 workers were dragging a temporary construction gate across my gravel farm lane, the only vehicle access to my shop trailer and the backfield. One dropped a steel foot into place. The other fed a chain through the frame. "Hey," I shouted, walking toward them. "That lane is private." The padlock snapped shut before I reached it. The foreman looked past me toward the road, and I followed his eyes. A new sign had been planted at the entrance, glossy and blue, still smelling like fresh vinyl. Maple Ridge Phase 4, model home coming soon. Under it, in smaller letters, was a site map showing my meadow already divided into lots. My stomach went cold. This wasn't a crew in the wrong field. Somebody had already sold my land on paper before the first nail ever hit wood. I drove straight home with red mud drying on my floor mats and the sound of that padlock still snapping in my head. My deed box sat on the top shelf of Dad's old gun cabinet, behind a stack of yellowed seed catalogs and a cigar tin full of fence staples. The box smelled like dust, cedar, and the kind of paper that had survived more winters than most houses. I spread everything across my kitchen table: warranty deed, tax maps, old survey, Dad's handwritten notes, even a Polaroid of him standing beside the black walnut with one boot on that brass cap. There it was in faded blue ink. Northeast corner, brass monument set at Walnut, then south along stone wall. Not future lot 42A. Not Maple Ridge. Not community anything. I drove back out before noon with a tape wheel, marking paint, and the old survey folded under my arm. The construction gate was still across my lane. Behind it, a skid steer coughed black exhaust while men stacked lumber beside the new frame. The orange stake looked even brighter in daylight, like a warning flag planted on a grave. I walked the stone wall from the roadside, staying on the part they hadn't blocked yet. Every few yards, I took a picture. Lichen on the rocks, old wire grown into bark, the black walnut spreading over the corner like it had been holding that line longer than any board president had been alive. Then a security guard in a black polo stepped out from behind a pickup. "Sir, you've been instructed not to enter Maple Ridge construction property." I almost laughed. "You're standing on my farm." He didn't blink. "I'm just telling you what I was told." That was the first time I understood this thing had a script. The foreman had one. Security had one. Somebody had prepared answers before I ever saw the house. So I went to the county office. The Henderson County building smelled like floor wax, old toner, and burnt coffee. A clerk named Denise pulled up the parcel map while I stood there with mud on my jeans. Her smile faded when she clicked into the newer subdivision file. "That's strange," she said. On her screen, my north meadow had been shaved clean off my tract and labeled Future Lot 42A. My pond trail, the little footpath Dad and I used to take with cane poles and a tackle box, was marked as Maple Ridge Community Nature Walk. I felt something hard settle in my chest. "That land isn't in Maple Ridge," I said. Denise lowered her voice. "This came in as a corrected Phase 4 plat, filed by the HOA's engineering consultant." Corrected from what? She looked at the screen a little too long. That's the part I'd want a surveyor to explain. By the time I got back to the meadow, a white Lincoln Navigator was parked near the new sign. Victoria Langford stood beside it in cream-colored slacks and boots that had never met real mud. Her blonde bob didn't move in the wind. Neither did her smile. "Mr. Whitaker," she called, like we had an appointment. "This would all go smoother if you stopped frightening the workers. You built a house on my land." Her smile warmed by half a degree. "Maple Ridge is improving an underused buffer area that was always intended for Phase 4. The corrected plat is on file. The county accepted it. The bank accepted it. The buyers accepted it." "There are buyers?" She glanced toward the framed house. A young family. Very excited. I'd hate for them to think a neighbor was trying to sabotage their future. That word, neighbor, landed wrong. I wasn't in her neighborhood. I had never paid her dues, voted in her elections, or signed her covenants. A concrete truck rumbled past us, tires wet with my meadow mud. I looked at the permit placard again. The site address read North Meadow Drive. But the truck hadn't come from North Meadow Drive. None of them had. They were all using my private gravel lane behind the locked gate. The trucks using my gravel lane changed everything. If Maple Ridge really owned that meadow, if their brand new plat was clean and their site address on North Meadow Drive was honest, then their crews wouldn't have needed my old farm road at all. They wouldn't have cut through my stone wall. They wouldn't have locked a gate across the lane my father had graded with a borrowed tractor in 1992. So the next morning, I went back before the framers arrived. The air still had that sour bite of wet concrete. Frost silvered the grass in the low spots, and every tire rut looked black against the meadow. I parked on the shoulder, grabbed my tape wheel, a roll of mason's string, orange marking paint, and the metal detector I used to find dropped cabinet screws in gravel driveways. I wasn't pretending to be a surveyor. I knew better than that. But I had worked construction layout for 6 years before I started building cabinets full-time. I knew what a real control point looked like. I knew the difference between a legal monument and a stick somebody pounded into dirt because it made the job easier. I started at the creek corner, where Dad's old survey said an iron pin sat 18 inches west of a split poplar. The poplar was gone, but the stump was still there, soft and gray. The detector chirped under a mat of leaves. I scraped with my pocket knife until rust showed through. One marker. I pulled string south from there along the old wall. The line ran exactly where Dad's note said it would. The stones were sunk deep, lichen-crusted, half-swallowed by roots. Not decorative. Not random. A boundary. Then I found the cut. About 40 yards from the black walnut, the wall didn't fall apart naturally. It had been opened. Clean rock faces. Fresh scrape marks. Red clay smeared across stone that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Wide enough for a concrete truck, almost exactly 12 feet. My stomach tightened. I photographed the gap, then rolled the tape from the lane to the new foundation. 36 feet from the edge of my gravel to the nearest corner of the slab. The house wasn't just near my land. It was fed by my land, built through my land, protected behind a gate on my land. A pickup crunched to a stop behind me. The same security guard stepped out, this time with another man in a Maple Ridge windbreaker. "Mr. Whitaker," the windbreaker said, "you were told not to interfere. I'm measuring my side of the wall." He looked at the string like it offended him. "That wall is not a recognized boundary." "Funny," I said. "It was recognized before Maple Ridge existed." He pulled out his phone and took a picture of me taking a picture of them. That was when I stopped talking. By noon, I called Tom Kessler. Tom was a licensed surveyor out of Asheville, the kind of man who wore a faded ball cap and treated bad measurements like personal insults. I'd used him once on a cabinet shop addition. He didn't promise me anything over the phone. "Don't move anything," he said. "Don't pull their stakes. Don't touch the cap. Just preserve what's there." That afternoon, I met him at the road. He walked the line slower than I did, tapping the ground with a probe, checking my father's survey against his tablet, kneeling near the bent brass cap without touching it. When he reached the orange MR 42A stake, he crouched and wiped mud off the top. No metal disc, no license number, no surveyor's stamp. He stood up, eyes narrowed toward the half-framed house. "That isn't a boundary marker, Caleb," he said. "That's a construction stake." Behind us, a compressor kicked on inside the frame, loud as a warning shot. And just like that, my question changed. I wasn't trying to prove where my land was anymore. I was trying to prove who had made everyone pretend it wasn't there. The next morning, my orange flags were gone. Not knocked over. Not blown loose. Gone. Every little marker I had placed along the old wall had been pulled clean out of the ground, and the holes were still dark with fresh dirt. The mason's string had been cut into short pieces and left in the grass like somebody wanted me to find it. That was the message. By 7:30, Vicky had turned that message into a neighborhood bulletin. I didn't see it until Mrs. Harper from across the road called me, her voice tight and embarrassed. "Caleb, honey, Maple Ridge sent something around about you." She forwarded it while I stood beside the broken stone wall with cold mud on my boots. The subject line read, "Safety notice regarding Phase 4 construction interference." My name was in the second paragraph. According to Vicky, I had entered an active construction site, harassed workers, disrupted a permitted home build, and created uncertainty for a young family under contract. She didn't say I owned the land. She didn't mention the brass cap, the stone wall, or the locked gate across my lane. She just painted me as the angry rural neighbor trying to drag progress backward by the ankles. It was smart. That was what made it dangerous. If you didn't know the ground, her version sounded reasonable. I saved the notice, screenshotted the sender list, and forwarded everything to myself and Tom. Then I took my phone off cellular and backed the files onto the little hard drive I kept in my truck console. Dad used to say you don't own a measurement until you can prove it twice. That morning, I decided the same thing applied to evidence. At 10, the pressure turned physical. A delivery truck from Carolina Hardwood Supply rolled up with the maple boards I needed for a kitchen job in Asheville. $2,000 worth of clean, straight lumber, already paid for. The driver stopped at the chain-link gate and leaned out his window. "Gate's locked, man." "I know," I said. "Give me 10 minutes. I called the number zip-tied to the gate. It went to voicemail. I called the builder. No answer. I called the county inspector's office and got a receptionist who said someone would call back. The driver checked his schedule, shook his head, and put the truck in reverse. "I've got 3 more drops before lunch. I can't sit here." I watched those boards disappear down Cedar Hollow Road while sawdust from the active build floated through the air behind me. By noon, a utility crew arrived with a trencher. They weren't loud about it. That was the worst part. No shouting, no scene, just men in reflective vests unloading equipment like the whole thing had been scheduled weeks ago. The trencher's chain bit into the meadow with a grinding metal growl, chewing a line toward the framed house. I filmed from outside the gate. "Private water line runs through there." I called. The operator looked over at the Maple Ridge site supervisor. The supervisor shook his head once. The machine kept going. 20 minutes later, muddy water coughed up from the trench and spread across the grass. My workshop water line was dead. That line fed the utility sink, glue station, and finishing area in my shop trailer. Without it, I couldn't clean brushes, mix stains, or finish the Asheville cabinets. I called the client from my truck and listened to the silence after I explained the delay. 18 years building a reputation, and one locked gate was making me sound like a man with excuses. That night, I loaded what unfinished cabinet doors I could reach into my pickup and drove them to Knoxville for a backup finish booth I sometimes rented from an old supplier. I kept the dashcam running the whole way, saved the gas receipt, and had the customer sign the delivery slip. At the time, it felt like survival. By sunset, when I got back, the roof trusses were swinging above my meadow on a crane. Then the first sheet of Maple Ridge house wrap snapped tight across the frame, bright blue against the darkening field, and the house stopped looking temporary. By the first week of April, the house had windows. That was the part that hit me hardest. Framing could still look temporary if you squinted. House wrap could still flap like a bad idea waiting to be corrected. But windows changed everything. Glass caught the morning sun where my father's hay shed used to stand, and for one ugly second, my own meadow reflected back at me like I was the trespasser. My shop trailer sat beyond the locked gate, quiet and useless. The utility sink gave one dry cough when I turned the handle. My lumber rack was empty where the maple boards should have been. A strip of blue painter's tape still marked the Asheville cabinet doors I hadn't finished on time. The client canceled that Monday. Not angry. Worse. Professional. "Caleb, I like your work," he said over the phone. "But we've got countertops scheduled and a family moving in. I can't build my whole project around your property dispute." By lunch, I had added the lost deposit, materials, booth rental, fuel, and labor delay into one red number on a legal pad. $18,400. I stared at it until the ink blurred. The emergency hearing was 2 days later at the Henderson County Courthouse. The hallway smelled like old varnish, coffee breath, and damp wool coats. I showed up with photos in a folder, mud on my boots scrubbed down as best I could, and Tom Kessler beside me carrying a survey case he hadn't been allowed to fully finish. Vicky arrived like she was hosting a charity luncheon. Cream coat, pearl earrings, a leather binder thick enough to stop a bullet. Behind her sat a young couple holding hands, eyes red, probably the buyers she had mentioned. The woman had a folder labeled home selections, cabinet colors, tile samples. Somebody had let them start dreaming about breakfast in a kitchen built on my dirt. That was Vicky's strongest move. She didn't make the hearing look like HOA overreach. She made it look like I was trying to destroy a family's future. Her attorney laid out glossy photos of the construction, a stamped as-built survey, a title commitment, bank draw paperwork, county permit copies. Everything clean, numbered, clipped, and official. Then came the community comments. Printed screenshots from Maple Ridge residents calling me unstable, greedy, anti-development. One said I had been lurking around children's future homes with tools. The tools were a tape wheel and marking paint. But online, truth loses weight fast. When it was my turn, I kept my voice level. "Your Honor, I'm asking for preservation of the site, access to my lane, repair of my water line, and a pause until the boundary is verified." The judge looked at my photos, then at Vicky's polished stack. "I'm not ordering demolition or a full construction halt today," he said. "Not on an incomplete record." The words landed like a door closing. He warned both sides not to interfere with evidence, but he also warned me not to disrupt permitted construction. Vicky's mouth barely moved, but I saw the smile hiding there. Outside, the buyers walked past me without looking up. By the time I got back to Cedar Hollow Road, someone had zip-tied a printed copy of the court order to the chain-link gate. My gate, my lane, my land, locked behind paper. Wind slapped it against the metal. I stood there reading the as-built survey Vicky's attorney had filed, forcing myself to slow down. Lot 42A, North Meadow Drive frontage. Temporary access assumed per owner permission. Then I saw the benchmark note in the corner. Elevation and layout tied to culvert 12B. I read it twice. Culvert 12B. The name scraped against a memory I couldn't place yet. Old county trucks, orange cones. Dad complaining about road crews tearing up the ditch. The house was still standing. I had lost the hearing. But for the first time all week, Vicky's perfect paperwork made one small sound out of tune. Culvert 12B kept needling at me all night. I had the as-built survey spread across my kitchen table beside Dad's old property map, both corners weighted down with coffee mugs. The newer sheet looked clean, stamped, professional, impossible to argue with at a glance. The old map was faded at the folds and smelled like cardboard and basement dust. But the two drawings had one thing in common. They both needed the ground to tell the truth. At dawn, I drove to North Meadow Drive with a flashlight, a tape wheel, and the court order folded in my jacket. I wasn't going through the gate. I wasn't touching their stakes. I stayed on the county shoulder where ditch grass brushed my boots and traffic hissed behind me. The survey said culvert 12B sat 38 feet east of the Maple Ridge sign. There was no culvert there. There was only a shallow regrade ditch, packed riprap, and a newer strip of asphalt feathered into the shoulder. I walked it twice slow. No pipe mouth. No concrete headwall. No county tag. Just crushed stone and winter weeds. Then the memory landed. Dad in his red flannel, leaning on a rake, cussing because county crews had torn up the ditch and blocked our lane for 2 days. That had been years ago, long before Vicky's Phase 4 sign, long before MR 42A. I took photos from every angle, then drove to the county road maintenance office. The place smelled like diesel, damp paper, and vending machine coffee. A man named Russell at the counter didn't care about HOA drama, which made me trust him more. I gave him the road name and asked for maintenance history near the Maple Ridge entrance. He came back with a stapled packet. Culvert 12B removed during shoulder regrade, October 2019. The words sat there in black ink, quiet and heavy. Back home, I laid that packet beside Vicky's survey. Her as-built claimed the house layout tied to a culvert that had not existed for more than 6 years. That didn't erase the house. It didn't magically win anything, but it meant her perfect paperwork had been standing on air. I called Tom Kessler. He was silent for a long moment after I read the maintenance note. "Scan that," he said. "Then scan it again. Email one copy to yourself, one to me, and put the paper somewhere dry." I did more than that. I photographed each page, uploaded the files to cloud storage, copied them onto the hard drive in my truck, and put the original in a freezer bag inside Dad's deed box. Then Tom and I went back to the old line. He shot measurements from the surviving creek markers. I held the prism rod while he worked, saying little, eyes narrowed behind his glasses. The black walnut stood over us, limbs creaking in the wind. The bent brass cap was still there in the mud, untouched, but now it lined up with Dad's old photo in a way the orange MR 42A stake never could. That evening, a Maple Ridge supervisor watched us from behind the chain-link gate. Vicky drove by once in her white Lincoln, slowing just enough for me to see her smile. She still thought the cord had clipped my wings. Good. I wanted her comfortable. Before dark, I gathered the road records, Tom's preliminary measurements, photos of the locked gate, concrete truck ruts, the broken stone wall, and the permit showing North Meadow Drive as the official frontage. I didn't explain the whole pattern to anyone who didn't need it yet. I just sent formal preservation notices to Maple Ridge, Barlow Custom Homes, the bank, the title company, and the survey firm. Then I filed a request for a court-supervised site inspection. For the first time since the nail gun started, I slept with my boots by the door and a plan already moving. The court-supervised site inspection was scheduled for a Thursday morning in May, and I arrived early enough to hear the meadow before everybody else tried to rename it. Wind moved through the black walnut leaves. A compressor thumped somewhere inside the nearly finished house. Plastic wrap snapped against the siding like a flag in bad weather. The chain-link gate still cut across my gravel lane, but now a county inspector stood beside it with a clipboard, and nobody could pretend the lock was just a misunderstanding. Tom Kessler parked behind me and lifted his survey case from the bed of his truck. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm here." That was the truth. If Tom's line was wrong, if Vicky's survey held, if the court decided I had been delaying a lawful build, I wasn't just losing a meadow. I could be staring at delayed damages, legal fees, a ruined business reputation, and a half-finished fight I couldn't afford to finish. Then Vicky's white Lincoln rolled up. She stepped out in a navy blazer, carrying that leather binder like it was body armor. Behind her came the builder, his attorney, a bank representative, someone from the title company, and the young couple who still wouldn't look directly at me. Vicky gave them a soft smile first. Smart. Always protect the audience before performing. The inspector unlocked the gate. The sound of that chain sliding through metal made my hands close into fists. I forced them open. We walked in as a group. Not through Maple Ridge's paved entrance. Through my gravel lane. Past the broken stone wall. Past tire ruts that had hardened into the clay. toward a house that looked more permanent every day. White trim, front porch posts, stacked stone veneer already mortared around the base. Tom set up his equipment near the creek marker. The inspector watched him work. Vicky watched me. "Mr. Whitaker has created a great deal of confusion," she said, calm enough for everybody to hear. "But Maple Ridge has relied on recorded documents every step of the way." "I'm not here to confuse anything," I said. "I'm here so the ground can be measured." Her smile held. "The ground has been measured." Tom said nothing. That was why I liked him. He shot the first point, then another. I held the prism rod where he told me, boots sinking slightly in soft soil near the black walnut. The orange MR-42A stake stood a few feet away, bright and cheap. The bent brass cap sat low in the mud like an old witness nobody had wanted to hear from. The builder's attorney finally stepped forward. "Access is really the issue here, isn't it? Mr. Whitaker keeps claiming improper use of the lane." Vicky opened her binder. My pulse changed. She removed a single page sealed in a plastic sleeve and handed it to the inspector first, then to the bank representative, then finally toward me. "Temporary construction access agreement," she said. "Signed by Mr. Whitaker. Maple Ridge had permission to use the gravel lane during Phase 4 utility and foundation work." The paper felt slick between my fingers. There was my name at the bottom. Caleb Whitaker. Not printed. Signed. The inspector leaned closer. The title representative adjusted her glasses. The builder let out a breath like someone had finally opened a window. Vicky looked almost sorry for me. "I understand buyer's remorse, Caleb, but you can't sign access over and then pretend we broke in." Tom's equipment beeped softly behind me. I looked at the date above the signature. March 24th, 2026. For 1 second, the whole meadow went quiet. The gate, the house, the walnut tree, Vicky's perfect binder. The court order folded in my pocket. The dashcam still saved on my hard drive. The fuel receipt from Tennessee. The signed delivery slip sitting in my file at home. Vicky had not cornered me. She had locked the last piece into place herself. I handed the page back carefully, keeping my face still. Now I had it. Vicky let the paper sit in the inspector's hand like she had just set down the final brick in a wall. "For the record," the county inspector said, "you're representing this as a valid access agreement signed by Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes," Vicky said. "Maple Ridge acted with permission." The title representative looked at me then, not with sympathy, with calculation. People in her line of work knew the weight of a sentence said in front of witnesses. Tom Kessler didn't look up from his instrument. "I'm ready to mark the boundary." The first orange paint line changed the air. Tom drove a temporary pin into the ground near the black walnut, then walked the line south with the inspector beside him. The tape stretched tight. The numbers came flat and cold. The nearest corner of the house sat 19 feet inside my tract. The garage sidewall was worse. The utility trench ran completely across my meadow before it ever reached the slab. The builder stopped chewing his gum. Vicky folded her arms. "That assumes his old farm markers are legitimate." Tom nodded once, like he had expected that. "Then let's use the recorded monument." He pointed toward the gravel pile near the broken stone wall. I had photographed that pile a dozen times, but never touched it. Under the inspector's direction, the builder's own crew moved the top layer with shovels. Stone scraped stone. Mud clumped off the blade. Then one worker froze. A round brass cap rolled loose, caked in red clay. The same cap I had seen bent sideways on March 17th. Tom wiped only enough mud to read the stamp. The number matched Dad's old recorded plat. The inspector read it twice, then looked toward the orange MR-42A stake standing bright and useless in the grass. "That construction stake has no surveyor identification," Tom said. Vicky's smile thinned. "Boundary markers get disturbed all the time on old rural parcels. That's exactly why corrected plats exist." That was her believable defense. Old land, old walls, old men's memories. Messy edges cleaned up by modern paperwork. So Tom asked for the benchmark. The HOA survey tied its layout to culvert 12B. The inspector walked to the road shoulder with us. Vicky followed, heels sinking into soft dirt. The survey showed the culvert 38 feet east of the Maple Ridge sign. There was nothing there but a regrade ditch and riprap. I handed over the county road maintenance packet. Removed October 2019. For the first time, Vicky reached for her phone and didn't seem sure who to call. The bank representative reread the survey. The title representative took a step away from Vicky's attorney. Nobody raised their voice. That was how I knew the ground had shifted. Then came the lane. Concrete delivery tickets from the batch plant showed every foundation pour delivered through Whitaker Farm Lane, not North Meadow Drive. My gate camera showed Maple Ridge workers cutting boundary ribbon after my preservation notice. The signed agreement Vicky had just confirmed showed March 24th. I placed my Knoxville fuel receipt, dashcam still, and customer delivery slip beside it. Same date, same hours, 200 miles away. Vicky said, "That doesn't prove." The title representative cut in quietly. "It proves enough for us to suspend reliance pending review." The bank attorney closed his folder. By June, the courtroom felt different. Vicky's binder was thinner. Mine was heavier. The judge read the inspection findings without drama. Encroachment established, access unsupported, benchmark unreliable, title cloud created by improper filing. Then his pen moved. Title quieted in my favor. Construction stopped. Structure to be removed at Maple Ridge and builder expense within 60 days. The first thing the court order changed was the sound. For 3 months, my meadow had been filled with nail guns, compressors, backup alarms, and men talking over engines. The morning after the ruling, there was nothing but wind moving through the black walnut and a single crow walking across the roof ridge like it was inspecting bad work. The chain link gate stayed locked for 2 more days. Then a county inspector arrived with a deputy, a bolt cutter, and a copy of the order in a plastic sleeve. The Maple Ridge padlock hit the gravel with a dull clank. I stood there longer than I needed to. That lane had been mine the whole time, but hearing my tires crunch over it again felt different. Not triumphant. More like breathing after holding your chest tight for too long. The teardown started the next week. Barlow Custom Homes sent a salvage crew first. They took the windows out carefully, stacked the doors, pulled usable lumber, and loaded trim boards onto flatbeds. Nobody cheered. Nobody needed to. Piece by piece, the house Vicky had promised to buyers as a dream home became materials with barcodes and dust on them. When the excavator finally bit into the foundation, the sound rolled across the meadow like thunder under the ground. Concrete cracked. Rebar squealed. Red clay opened beneath the slab that never should have been poured. I smelled wet dirt for the first time instead of sawdust and house-wrap plastic. The water line was repaired 2 days later. A plumber traced the break, shook his head at the trench path, and replaced the crushed section with new pipe. When water finally slapped into the shop sink, brown at first, then clear, I just stood there with my hand under the faucet. My cabinet business didn't heal overnight. Reputations don't work like light switches. But the Asheville client called after the inspection findings became public. He didn't have the same job anymore, but he had another one. "I should have waited," he said. I didn't make him apologize twice. Work is work. Trust gets rebuilt one finished corner at a time. The settlement came through in pieces: survey costs, legal fees, water line repair, restoration, and the $18,400 I had documented down to the receipt. The title company handled the buyers. The builder's insurer handled part of the damage. Maple Ridge paid more than they wanted and less than revenge would have demanded, which told me it was probably about right. Vicky resigned before the audit report was finished. No speech. No public breakdown. Just a short email from the HOA board announcing new interim leadership and mandatory outside boundary verification for every future easement, expansion, and construction access request. The Maple Ridge Phase 4 sign disappeared from the road by Friday. Someone left the post for a week, 2 bare wooden stakes standing in the weeds like the last bones of a bad idea. Mrs. Harper brought me a peach pie and pretended it was because she had made too much filling. Tom Kessler came out once more, this time with a crew and a concrete monument form. They reset the brass survey cap beside the black walnut. Not bent in the mud anymore. Not half hidden under tire tracks. Level, clean, stamped, and set solid where Dad had always said the line began. I rebuilt the old hay shed smaller than before, with wide doors and a workbench facing the meadow. By late July, native grass had started pushing through the straw over the foundation scar. The gravel lane was quiet again. My split-rail gate stood where the chain link one had been. At sunset, I closed it myself and heard the latch settle into place.